You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Casey Costello has been on The Crunch before, and it was a very popular interview with heaps of replays. She's the real deal and now has a chance to power up New Zealand First by bringing in another MP if she can win the Port Waikato by-election. To discuss her campaign and more, she's on the line and with me now. Welcome back to The Crunch, Casey. Good to have you.
Thanks very much, Cam. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, you've had a bit of a false start, haven't you? You've got right into the campaign, you know, you're launching and everything going forward, and then we had the unfortunate demise of the ACT Party candidate. Truly sad, and then the vagaries of the Electoral Act kick in, and so we have a by-election coming up near the end of this month.
Yeah, I said it was like sort of you run a marathon and then you get to the finish line and someone says, oh, we've just added 10 Ks onto it. So, yeah.
Are you up for that extra 10 Ks?
Yeah, no, it's actually probably easier because you're now campaigning purely on who you are and your suitability as a person to represent the electorate. You sort of, you're not so much having to double up with the party policies and the party position. It's very clean, and it's just about who you want to see represent the community. So, reality
is with this by-election is it's a two-horse race in reality between yourself and Andrew Bailey as people, rather than pushing for the party vote and all of that. But you're already in because you're number 3 on the New Zealand First list. If you win this seat, there's a benefit, isn't there, to New Zealand First that is of greater importance than any pitch that Andrew Bailey can make. And that is that the number 9 on your list is a great candidate with incredible skills who would then come in because you'd go off the list, and then, of course, he'd come in on the list, which means that...
Yeah, so that's Dr. David Wilson, great guy, great mind, just would be outstanding for us and for the country, I think, to get him on board. And it's really hard to kind of pitch that message because, I mean, already MP is difficult enough to understand.
Yeah.
And then adding this to the mix is really hard. But, yeah, from our point of view, and, it's like that, no pressure, Casey, but,
we need you to win this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is the bonus, isn't it? Because there is no bonus for Andrew Bailey to be elected as the MP. Everyone assumes he's going to win this. And if he doesn't win it, there's no real change to the National Party. There's no significant name that would add to the benefit of Parliament and the country as a general. But New Zealand First has got David there that can come in as well, and also would provide that extra, in my view, it would provide a little bit of extra backbone for New Zealand First to stiffen up the government.
Yeah, and that's the skill set that he brings is incredible. And I think the other thing is that people have got to realise that they don't lose Andrew Bailey. He's there, highly likely to get a ministerial position. It's that sort of, they get 2 representatives, both, Andrew with his experience and me with, this is my town. This is a huge opportunity for me to be able to be a voice for our region. And that's what I've kind of keep going on about is that, this is about, to me, this is my home and this is why I want to stand for it. It's not just a political position. It's, I'm already an MP. This is because I really, really want to be the representative of Port Waikato, and so that's why I'm fighting for it. And the big bonus for us, as you said, is that we get not only another candidate, but a great candidate. Someone who would just be outstanding. So I fight on. I sleep less and I fight on.
Sleep less, fight on. I guess there's a bonus too in that your other MPs who have just been elected with you because of New Zealand's first success at the election can now come and help as well in the electorate and boost your candidacy around the electorate. Of course, National can do exactly the same. They can roll out, essentially what are going to be cabinet ministers to infest the electorate and, push the vote for the national candidate. It's a real two-horse race. I mean, I can't see anybody else getting it. Labor hasn't even bothered. ACT didn't replace their candidate, and everybody else doesn't matter. So this is a real two-horse race where there's some real benefits for people to back Casey Costello, aren't there?
Well, I think so. I think there's some real benefits. Yeah. I think the part that I kind of is that I've proven that I'm not, that I'll stand for the issues that everybody's a bit afraid to speak up on. I come from a police background. I policed this area. This is where I did most of my police service. I know the issues that are impacting us from a crime perspective, the justice system, and how it's become so difficult to get anything dealt with or even taken, given priority through, because there's just such a backlog on the court system. I can see what can be done, and the other problem we've got is that we kind of like we sort of got split in half through the super city, and we kind of sit at the tail end of the Auckland council mega machine and the top end of the Waikato regional, and so having something that'll bring us together, because we're an oddly shaped electorate as well in terms of where our boundaries are.
I mean, it's really strange. Half is in the Waikato and half's in Auckland.
Yeah, and that's why it's really, because from everything, Auckland Transport in terms of how our roading's divided up and where the expenditure is, and all of those sort of things need somebody who's prepared to kind of knock on doors and bring people together to get some solutions. And I think that's what I bring to the table, is that I will have that availability, and I'm accessible. I'm quite happy for everyone to know where I live, what my phone number is, just give me a shout, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean the map of the electorate is weird. You've got huge amounts of population around Pukekohe, and bordering on, Karaka is extending south across the border there. There's large pockets of urban centres there. South of the Waikato River is kind of desolate, with all due respect. I mean, there's not a lot down that coast, Port Waikato down to Te Akau. Not many people in there, so it's largely an Auckland-centric thing. But like you say, Auckland has kind of abandoned that area. Yeah, and the storms in February earlier this year, have left roads devastated. They haven't even been repaired. Like the main road out to Awhitu is still cut.
Yeah, still got the stop-go lights.
Yeah, stop-go lights one way. It's like it's forgotten, because, never mind, it doesn't matter. There's only a few people who live there. You've got a case that you could push on that against the incumbent, which is Andrew Bailey, because what's he done since February? To push those things, and no one can criticize you for that. You weren't the MP; he was the MP. So this is an old-fashioned stump style election campaign, where you can actually hold them to account. Yeah, knock on the doors and hold them to account. What's Andrew Bailey done? And you can make, without, you're not the kind of person to make grandiose promises. You like to deliver on things. But, this is the thing that people seem to be missing. And I see that in the electorate, in the media, the way they're portraying this is almost a foregone conclusion. The National Party is going to win this. But by-elections do deliver up sometimes very strange results.
And this is the thing, I think, where MMPs kind of muddied the waters around that idea of that, the local electorate MP being accountable, having the office you walk into, and that person being there, that person having to take your call and front up, and be answerable to what's being delivered. Soil erosion is a massive, and coastal erosion, like the catchment areas, all of these sort of things that affect, if you look at the area, we're kind of like a microcosm of New Zealand. We've got the steel mill, which is a massive, massive industry for the area.
Yeah,
we're the food basket of New Zealand, really. Like we've got all of this productive land, all the market gardens, all of the greenhouses, all of those sort of And then we've got dairy and beef and all of that sort of stuff producing.
And
so
probably the largest swamp in New Zealand as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we can get this moving, like if we can prove that, you can get some good outcomes and put some solutions in place in this area, then it's a model that can go out to everywhere else. And it's wrenching that, which I think has happened a lot throughout the country, is this centralised control that was pushed through from this the Labor government, that was, everything was being done from Wellington. We're not a one-size-fit-all country. Like every region, has, particularly in agriculture and horticulture and farming, we have our own issues and own ways to deal with them. Flood protection in catchment areas is totally different here than, we don't snow, so we don't have to worry about the stuff that they're worrying about in the South Island. This is why it's important to have strong local representation. And I don't claim to be an expert on these things, but I know great people have great networks, good people too, with expert knowledge that, that's how we used to solve things. That was how we always used to, you got the right people from the place with 40 years experience living on this land to tell you, what'll work and what won't work.
I mean, it is an amazing electorate. I mean, it is an amazing electorate. You've got... the West Coast, all the desolation of that. You've got high industry, like you say, with the steel mill. You've got urban areas, Pukekohe, going up and towards Karaka. Then you've got across the motorway, all the way down to Te Kauwhata. You've got winemaking and all of that happening around there. You've got amazing wetlands and all the way out almost really to the coast. On the other side, it's one of the few electorates that almost goes from coast to coast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a massive electorate. I mean, I don't think people understand what they're actually looking at here with Port Waikato.
Yeah. And those communities, if you look at back, around regional New Zealand, these small communities, this is our town. Like, Te Kauwhata maybe, but they're an identity. They're their own town. They don't want to be sort of seen as, just an afterthought. They've got a strong identity. Waiuku's amazing town. Like it's really growing and developing, and
Same
it just
with
needs that representation. Yeah. And Pocono's where I live, and it's gone crazy. Like it's massive.
You drive down there, and there's all these new houses. Waiuku, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for. My cousin was actually the cop in Waiuku for many, many years.
Yeah.
So you probably know him. His name was Greg Malsol.
Oh gosh, yeah,
Right?
too. Yeah, definitely.
So that's my cousin, and that was back in the days when you actually were alone in Waiuku.
Oh, yeah.
You had to deal with things, let's just say, creatively.
Yeah, I remember policing night shift in Puke because the lights used to go off at about 11 o'clock at night. All the street lights went off, and so it was all darkness. And so night shift down there was definitely. You didn't have a lot of backup support down there, so
yeah. I mean, it was one of those towns where if a certain crime of a certain style, might be whiteware stolen, you went and knocked on that family's door and said, "Look, mate, you've taken diabolical liberties. Can you just take the freezer back?" They wouldn't do it these days that way, but
no. That
was how it was handled back in the day. You went and knocked on the door and you said, "Look, guys, take it back." And we're kind of missing. I've just been talking to John Banks, and he was telling me how we need to do a 180 return. We have to actually turn this country physically around from where we've come from the last 6 years, and in fact it's probably a bit longer than that. It's probably over the last 20 or 30 years. We need to actually backtrack and go back to what works. And that's your experience, isn't it? You've been a copper. You've dealt with all types of society in policing in those areas. And then, of course, you've got all your other work that you've done since, Taxpayers Union, Hobson's Pledge, all the rest of it.
Yeah, and I think people kind of misconstrue when we say about, we need to go. We're not saying you've got to go back in time, but we do have the opportunity to look at the stuff that was working,
Yes,
and take from that what was effective. And just like you said about the community-based policing, and we'd go through centralise and community, but it's not an either-or solution. But you do have those strong identities that know their community, that understand, what the issues are, and respond to those vulnerabilities within the community and deal with it. And the centralised policing model, where you kind of fly in and fly out, you respond to a job and you're gone again. That doesn't fix the problem, and we've kind of got to a position now. We have more people sitting in offices diagnosing, how we're going to eradicate crime, and less people actually out there responding to it. We've got to shift that around and make sure that we have the resources. The 24/7 police stations went, those sort of things that, at 3:00 in the morning, there was a building you could go and knock on the doors and someone would be there. And it meant something, and those are the sort of back to basic stuff that it's not a nostalgic thing. It's a let's look at what was working before and doesn't need to be revisited, because we can learn a lot from our own history.
I've got a couple of mates down Port Waikato way. If you go to Port Waikato, turn left and carry on to halfway to nowhere. There's no policing down there,
No.
right? If you live on that road, the only policing you've got is what you and your neighbours organise.
Yeah.
And, they tell me about the rustling that goes on, the people who come down, they actually don't keep stock near the road anymore. But they're also some of the most generous people around. Like, one of them was telling me about somebody who was cruising the road. They got a phone call on on their local community notice board, I guess, from want of a better word. It might have been WhatsApp or something. Hey, watch out for this car. They're cruising slowly. They don't look like they belong here. The farmers come out, block the roads on either end of where they are, and then they have a chat. And they were saying that one family there, they looked like they were looking for a sheep, and they said to me, what are you doing here? You don't look like you're from here. What's going on? They said, oh, look, we really need some meat. And they said, okay, well, come with me. And they went down to the farm chiller, and there was an old ewe that was hanging there that, for whatever reason, and they gave it to them. So they're actually really generous as well. It's at the same time as trying to prevent a crime. Like that old bit of meat, sheep meat, was hanging in the chiller. That might have been to feed the dogs. It might have been to feed the family, whatever. It wasn't a valuable animal anymore. It might have died for whatever reason. But that crime that's happening there is just so sad as well. That there are people that they're not rustling in large numbers, but they're going and grabbing something of opportunity. There's a sheep or a lamb or even a cattle beast that's close at hand. But imagine the position that person is in, that they feel that they need to go and do that.
Yeah. And that's the differential. That is those that are doing what they desperately need in order to provide for their families, and those that are just causing harm and profiting off other people's pain. And that's the part where I see that those small communities can really, because all you need to do is go on the marketplace and the local community pages, and there's constantly, is this your cat? I found this wallet. I found the set of keys. Those are the sort of great things that happen. And I've never seen one so far that someone hasn't gone, oh, that's my cousin's, or yeah, I'll get that, or helping each other out is kind of that part that we sort of missing. And that's why I love this. I love this community. It's great. And like you just said, your cousin, we all know each other. It's just crazy the number of people that have reached out since I've been campaigning. That oh yeah, I used to go to I was because my dad was into horse racing, so there's that whole community that, oh, you're John Costello's daughter, like those sort of things. It's just great. That's what I think that's the country we were built on.
Well, I mean, it's like your brother coming to lunch with my mates, right? He started coming since I spoke to you last, and you raised that. He's been coming a couple of times to lunch, and he wasn't there. He wasn't there on Monday, but he should be. He should join in with the rest of Cam's buddies that come along.
He had to head up north because he's gone up to my mum, lives up north, so we all have our turnabout going checking on mum.
I find the Port Waikato electorate fascinating because of all the different things that occur within there. Now, I've got a mate and I help him out occasionally, or I did in the past. We had to do a couple of repossessions of some cars that he'd rented out down that way. And, one of them, you come across the Tuakau Bridge there, hang a right, follow the river, and then up in the hills there beside the road, there's some communities that are really, you'd only have to describe them as impoverished, kind of like living under canvas.
Yeah.
And I don't know, may have been summer, may have been not, but, we had to go and get this car. And, I thought I was going to get the bash one time when I was up there. From this particular family, we got the car, and but I felt really bad having to take it off them because it's not that they were short of transport. There's plenty of cars there, but the cars were the most valuable things they had, and it really shook me that day when we had to go and get that car, and take that back to Auckland. But they were taking diabolical liberties at the time, but I was still mindful of the position that they were in. And they're only, 15 minutes from Pukekohe. They're only 40 minutes from Papakura.
Yeah.
And living essentially in a shanty. And I never realized that there was people that close to Auckland that were living like that. And it shocked me to my core. And I'll have no doubt that they're still living there. And exactly in that position.
And there's lots of situations like that where you kind of get trapped in a position where it's hard to get your way out. And if that's all then it's really hard to find your way out. And those are those sort of wraparound services and support that you need. But sometimes there's individuals that don't even know what's available to them, don't know what opportunities are there because, navigating a government website to try and find what you're entitled to is almost, it's like, a Rhodes Scholar needs to find the right answers.
I mean, the reality is these people don't have computers.
Yeah.
If they are navigating a government website, it's on a phone. But even then, down that road on the way to Port Waikato, there's not much coverage, right? So they're impoverished physically, probably mentally as well. Definitely financially and also technologically wise. And I don't know how to fix that other than this is not far from the largest city in Auckland. Like literally it's less than 2 kilometres to the border of Auckland, which runs right down the middle of Port Waikato electorate. And there's two societies that are existing that close to each other.
And this is where I think that the empowerment of local community, that the stuff that local communities are able to achieve, and we see that whenever there's these big storms or there's a disaster, these communities wrap around and help each other out without wavering, and it's that stuff and that's why I think it's a great community and great area because you have the opportunity to do that and to get people to come together and work on the successes. But it's just kind of having someone that is going to, set things in motion. How can we do this? What are your issues? How can we make this? And getting people. And I think that's what I like. That's all the way through my working career. It's the success of the team. It's being able to build people that work to their strengths, identify who's the good people, and how you can get the most out of what they're able to do, and bring those teams together and make them successful. And that's kind of what I see as a electorate MP position, is to kind of identify those people that have the willingness and capacity to kind of step up and be involved, and how can I facilitate them to be successful in their communities, and what could be done. And I really look forward to the challenge. I really want to be part of that kind of thing. The old, going back nostalgically, when your local borough council mayor used to be the guy that ran the butcher shop. You'd walk in there and go like, I'll have 12 sausages, and by the way, the stormwater drain's backed up. Like it was that sort of environment. And I think that's where you can get some real success from your communities, is having that kind of somebody who's available and contactable, and how does that work for those separate, isolated locations?
Yeah, and likely it was fixed by him ringing Bob, the guy down the road who happens to have a digger handy. Can you get whoop round there and clean that drain out for me, mate? We'll make sure the next sausage sizzle we get everything from you. That was how things worked.
Yeah.
The super city, everyone said, this is how we're going to improve things, but on the margins, things haven't really improved, have they? I mean, we've got, like we discussed earlier, the Awhito Peninsula Road that still got stop-go lights on it. Here we are months and months and months after the actual event. We're likely to have some significant weather events with the way things are panning out again, and nothing's fixed.
Yeah, and that's the aspect of the super city was that, there was to be a review of whether it delivered what it promised, and whether it created the savings and efficiencies that it promised. That review's never taken place. That's never happened. It's just they trucked on, carrying on as if, we're just going to assume it's been successful. And yet, if you talk to the people in my electorate, it hasn't been successful, and there's numerous reasons why it hasn't been successful. So, somebody needs to stand up and go, hang on, like, we want some answers here. How much is it saved? Nothing. And how much is it delivered in benefits?
Less than nothing.
So, yeah. So somebody needs to call time.
Well, somebody needs to stand up for the Port Waikato community. And I guess you're sitting across multiple city or council boundaries, but the vast number of your constituents are in Auckland City. Do you see it your role as the local MP to actually go and sit down with Wayne Brown and other key councillors up there and that are close to where you are as well, and say, okay, guys, things aren't working. Yeah. How can we make these work?
Yeah. And what are their rub points? And where's our common ground? Where's our rub points? And let's kind of work through, because this is what the constituents are saying. How are we going to fix this? And empower individuals to be able to take some action, as well as, hold their feet to the fire. Because and I absolutely do, because I mean it is the majority of the population sits within Auckland Council, but we also have that crossover with the Waikato region. We have a number of smaller iwis that are kind of silenced because there's much bigger bigger entities in play, and so it's about how do we make sure that the balance is being achieved from the smaller communities as well.
Just talking about community, this is a David and Goliath battle that you're in. You're up against the National Party and the machine that the National Party has, where they can, it's not very far for them to drive people in from, Papakura electorate, which is one of the largest majorities, with Judith Collins, a competent MP there, and a huge machine that keeps her operating. A little bit further north, you've got the resources and the influence of councillors that are in there, and also the National Party machine, as a whole. New Zealand First is under-resourced, ill-equipped really, to have this David and Goliath battle. But you've got this experience, with community involvement. How can people help you? How can they get in touch with you to volunteer to help on the ground with this campaign in the few short weeks that we've got left?
Well, the easiest way is just kc@nzfirst.nz. That's our volunteer network, so all of those sort of things. and just reach out if you're able to do something. I've got great team, but likewise, we've got teams coming in from all around the country to help this campaign as well.
Yeah.
And I think the strong message is that they don't lose their MP, they don't lose Andrew Bailey, but they might get a bit more from having a different voice and a different sort of opportunity to be heard that they haven't had before. So it's David and Goliath, but we're up for the fight, and everybody wrote off New Zealand First in this election, and we proved them wrong. So I think we can do it again.
Yeah, and I guess the pitch is that you can actually power up by voting for you for the local MP means that you get another MP coming in off the list with skills and ability, and stiffens the resolve of the government. Gives them that experience that's added. Whereas voting for Andrew Bailey, you don't lose him as an MP, but there's no gain either by electing him as the electorate MP, because it's always already resolved. So, I mean, that's an interesting pitch. It'll be hard to get the Blue Rinse Brigade to actually think outside the box, but I guess you've got an option to do that. When I say Blue Rinse, I mean, you always vote national. It's very rare that by-elections come along and you can actually challenge their thinking a little bit.
Yeah, and it's unusual because we're both already there. Like, we're both list MPs. So you kind of, often you'll have one that's, the sitting MP and then someone fighting to get in. We're both there. So, here's a chance to change the status quo. So, we'll give it a crack.
I know you can't disclose anything about, what you know about negotiations and things like that, but what are some of the areas, now that we know broadly what the makeup of the government is going to be, what are some of the areas that you'd be hoping that New Zealand First can make an impact in government, participating in government rather than perhaps sitting on the crossbenches like has been suggested?
I think that, it was pretty clear from our manifesto. There's a lot of common ground, I think, if you look at where we're all sitting. But our manifesto was pretty clear around, our desire to have our democracy protected and ensure that there is this equality before the law, and that individual freedoms around, having a more in-depth COVID inquiry. And so amongst all those, there's some really common ground, and just getting the country moving, getting things, the economy moving and stuff, some real practical steps towards that. So, it's well above my pay grade at this point, but those are my wish lists.
Yeah. I mean, the COVID inquiry, people have said it's too difficult. We've already got an inquiry happening. And last week I was speaking to David Farron. He thought that was actually one of the easiest ones to solve, simply by redrafting the terms of reference and maybe adding a couple of extra commissioners into the commission of inquiry. And I would have thought that would be an easy one to tick off for Winston sitting down with Christopher Luxon. And there should be no reason why David Seymour would oppose that either. Because the terms of reference that Ardern set were incredibly narrow, and it almost looked self-serving from the way that the terms of references were created.
And I think if you looked at, ACT's on their website's got some policy positions recognising that there needed to be a broadening of the scope and stuff. So I don't think there's a huge shift, And, I think that exists amongst all of us have gone into this discussion and that, said repeatedly, this is about achieving a stable government. And I think it's very achievable. And
that's the thing, isn't it? That a lot of people mistake decision-making as being Winston making all the decisions, when the reality is Winston's actually a team player, and it's in the hands of the caucus to make decisions on where things are going and what you're going to achieve.
And I think that's true, that came out really clearly after, everybody was criticising 2017 and what occurred. It was a democratic process then, that this is not, it's a cooperative process. And I think, it's going to be interesting what pans out over the next few days, but I think it's all indications of things going really well.
The media are trying to talk this up as being something that's going to drag on for weeks and weeks and weeks. What's your view on that? Do you think it's going to last weeks, or is it more days?
Because I'm not involved in the intricacies of it, but I see nothing why the media is saying that. I think it's just a scaremongering dialogue. I can't see that they've got any justification to be talking about this dragged out process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the fact that everyone is practicing message discipline and actually not talking to the media, so they're having to fill the gap by not having politicians with their own reckons. And as we've seen from even election night, where Tova O'Brien was saying that even if you stood on the grave of a family member and really thought hard, no one would ever have picked a result like this. Everyone in New Zealand First is probably thinking, well, we picked it. Everyone in ACT is probably thinking, well, we picked it. And everyone in National is thinking, well, we picked it. This is going to happen. It's only the people in the bubble and, the Wellington bureaucrats who didn't pick it. But it was obvious, really, that there was a mood for change. And, 53% of the voting population didn't vote for Labour, the Greens, or the Maori Party. And that's a majority.
And the result was almost, and completely in line with the polling. I think the only thing that was National actually got more than the polling was saying, but it was all pretty in line with the polls. So it was, we were tracking, forward each poll that came out. So and that's kind of where we finished up. So
once you get over that 5%, it kind of cements in. And you can get some gains. The thing that astonished me about the election is that this literally was the worst government that we've ever had in living memory. In fact, since the beginning of democracy in New Zealand, if you listen to Michael Bassett, and he's a political historian, and there's no reason not to listen to Michael Bassett. He said it's the worst government ever, but National couldn't get over 40%. In fact, I was analysing some numbers before, talking to you, because somebody commented on my website that Christopher Luxon has a mandate, and I thought, really, a mandate? Okay, 38%, 38.06%, and I looked up 2017 and what the Labour Party got in 2017 when the National Party people were saying Ardern doesn't have a mandate to govern. She doesn't have this. She doesn't have that. Well, it's less than 2% different. Right? It's less than 2%. It's 1.6% or something, the difference between Labour in 2017 and National in 2023. And so if the National Party thinks that Christopher Luxon has a mandate, then surely Jacinda Ardern had a mandate in 2017, but they won't admit that.
Yeah, actually, I hadn't looked at those stats. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, these are little tiny things that political tragics like me look at, right? Because we sit there and go, well, hang on a second, let's deal with facts and let's deal with reality. And, that then goes to all the minor parties as well. The polls were saying that only New Zealand First, ACT, and the Maori Party and the Green Party as minor parties were going to make it into Parliament. And we had all of these smaller parties saying, no, the polls are wrong. People aren't answering honestly. And we're going to get, one case, one leader said they were going to get 2 million votes, which means pretty much that would be over 50% of the vote. And the polls were right. You said the polls were right. I know the polls were right. I've been studying elections since I was in nappies. You really ignore polls at your peril, don't you?
Yeah. And it's, there was some nuances around, electorate seats and who was going to win, but that's where I think people misunderstand how MMP works still, that you kind of think, oh, well, how does that impact? But we also, when you can go back to how everything broke down in the end, I mean, I had a lot of sympathy for, the minor parties who arose out of a need to, feeling that they weren't being heard and wanting to have their opportunity to be heard. But we also had the experience that, we tracked according to the polls. We delivered what the polling was saying. It was sort of a good benchmark. But I think people forgot that I think there was a real sense that we didn't want to have that situation of a majority government again. I think we'd been stung by having a single party majority government, and everybody was kind of determined that we weren't going to end up in that situation. And I wonder how much that impacted how people voted versus voting for the major parties and shifting away. I don't know whether that was a telling component. But
it's an interesting component, because I hadn't thought about it like that. That we've been so shocked by what a majority government did that we don't actually want that ever again. And so we've powered up the ACT Party in New Zealand First to act as a bulwark or a handbrake or whatever is necessary to stop a large party doing whatever the hell they want.
Yeah. That was my sense anyway. There was that idea that, because we sort of talked about, like, it's clearly now MMP's here to stay. We've cemented it. It's not, and we had a taste of what it was like to go back to effectively a first past the post kind of government, and we sort of went, oh no, we're not having that again. We'll stick this way.
Yeah, well, we don't want to. I mean, we did reject first past the post. It may have been a mistake, but it as a friend of mine always says, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting, the things that persist, because I had a discussion the other day with my mates around the lunch table, and they were talking about, the impact of selecting a speaker and how that means you get one less vote. And I had to say to them, look, guys, for 27 years that hasn't been the case. And they went, what? I said, no, under MMP, the standing rules in Parliament were changed, that the Speaker actually gets included in the votes that the whip says. We no longer have these division bells where people march out through the corridors, and it doesn't happen anymore, right? They call for a vote, the party whips declare their number, and if they're the governing party or the party that includes the Speaker, their vote is included in the number that's given.
Yeah.
And they were shocked. They were gobsmacked. Yeah. I said to them, this has been the way it has been for 27 years. By the time we get to the end of this cycle, it'll be the way it's been for 30 years.
Yeah.
And we also saw this with this unbelievable misunderstanding of how voting for a minor party that doesn't make the threshold is a wasted vote, and how not the votes get reallocated, but the effect of the votes gets reallocated. Yeah. And, somebody just on my website this morning was saying exactly that. They were saying, oh, no, I've talked to the Electoral Commission. They've said that the votes are thrown out. Well, it's the votes are, but the effect
the percentage. It's the percentage.
Yeah, that's right. It's the percentage. And, if that was the case, there would be nearly 6% of the seats in Parliament would now be vacant, right? But they're not. We've got all of the seats allocated. We've got 100% or 100% plus one of the seats. We've got an overhang, so it's actually 100% plus three are allocated. And the easiest way to understand that is, let's say Labour and National both got 45% and there was 10% wasted. Right, so 90% was counted and 10% was wasted. If what the Electoral Commission says is 100% true, that the votes are thrown out and the percentage that was wasted isn't counted, then there'd only be 90% of the 120 seats filled. Yeah, right. But that's not the case, right? 100% of the 120 seats are filled, and therefore the effect of the wasted vote is it does get reallocated. Yeah.
And the fact that, like you say, 30 years on nearly, we're still explaining that process and how it all works, and how, and even down to the overhang, discussion, people still trying to get their heads around how an overhang works and how that kind of impacts. And And then you get, think you've got all that sorted, and then you have the Port Waikato situation where we've got a whole another situation arising. So,
well, just on that overhang, I mean, I heard John Tamahiri the other day saying that because they won 6 of the 7 Maori electorates, that they have the mandate to speak for all Maori.
Mm.
Well, hang on a second. The Maori Party got 2-point-something%.
Yeah.
Right. So Maori make up close to 17% of the population, but the Maori Party only got close to 3%. It's hardly a mandate.
Yeah, no, I think the numbers they got about, I mean, and even if you proportioned it to the number of Māori on the Māori roll, they're not even a majority of that. So, that kind of, and that's what I keep coming back to, this idea that, Māori, being Māori, we kind of forego our individual identity, and we're apparently supposed to think and vote and act as if we're the Borg from, Star Trek. It was just that we are, we all think and act the same, and all you have to do is look at the Māori roll votes in terms of how it distributes across the parties and know that, Māori vote just like everyone else, and based upon what's the best representation
based on need,
our needs, and that's why nearly half of Māori aren't on the Māori roll. It was because
that's right. And you look at the top 3 places in New Zealand First. You've got Winston Peters, Shane Jones, Casey Costello, 3 Maori who don't subscribe to that view of John Tamahiri that the Maori Party now is the official voice of Maori in New Zealand. And the reality is the Maori Party represents a hard left view on the world, a rather heroic assumption and rewrite of the Treaty of Waitangi at the expense of every other New Zealander. And they really don't have a mandate. If those Maori seats disappeared and they tried to stand on their platform, they'd end up with 0 seats.
Mm.
So I call it a Maori mander, which is a little bit facetious. But there's no other way to describe those 7 seats other than a gerrymandering of the system that we no longer need. 34% of Parliament is Maori. Right?
And the fact that there is this, if you consider Māori we're iwi and hapu-centric, the best representation is more confined local representation, not massive geographical areas that are allocated to Māori seats.
Mm.
And if you had better local representation, you would get better outcomes for those communities, including the Māori in those communities. But this structure doesn't serve, and it hasn't served the best interests of Māori for some time. And all you have to do is go through what has been delivered, what is the outcomes, what is the benefits that have been delivered. And aside from a lot of, differentiation by race and advocating a victim narrative, there's been not delivery of outcomes. And that was where you need the accountability to say, well, what have you done? What have you delivered? Mm. And, the quote of that really struck me was when, the Māori Party referenced the fact that their role will be to be the pebble in your shoe.
That's annoying.
So their objective, their political objective is to be annoying. How is that benefiting Māori? To be annoying is not a political objective. And I think Māori, we deserve a lot more than someone that's going to make their political stand to be just a nuisance. I mean, that's just appalling.
I mean, I look at some of those electorates that you talk about, Ikaroa Rāwhiti, for example. What commonality is there between Ngāti Porou in the north and Ngāti Kahungunu in the south?
Mm.
There's almost none.
Yeah.
We look at Wairiki electorate as well. You've got Tūwharetoa around Lake Taupo. You've got Tūhoi in the middle of the Ureweras and multiple other iwi out on the coast in the Bay of Plenty. There's no commonality there other than the word Maori. And so you've got one person who's representing them And there's this arrogant assumption that they represent all of Maori because, well, we won 6 out of the 7 Maori seats. It's divisive.
And that's the part that if that skill and capability of those politicians that have put their names forward, if they were dedicated to their local area and being able to represent the local iwi in a much more compliant, and that's what the Royal Commission in the 80s said, was that MMP would remove the relevance of those seats because you would have increased, better local representation that was able to, and would encourage greater Māori representation because you're engaged in your local community. And they fight against it, but I don't think they're fighting against it because it's going to reduce outcomes for Māori. It's about retaining a political relevance, not retaining what's best for Māori. And I think that's what we need to have those discussions about.
Well, I mean, that's what Winston Peters said at the launch of your campaign for the by-election. He wants to remove the Maori seats. To howls of outrage, of course. But that's been a long-standing position in New Zealand First, and they've never been in a position to be able to do that. And ironically, it's also used to be the position of the National Party until John Key decided he really wanted to have the Maori Party involved, and so abandoned what was an electoral promise that was started by Don Brash.
Yeah, and that's the part is about what. Again, this I harp on about what's the best outcomes, what will produce the best outcomes, what will produce the best accountability, what will actually advance us in our issues. And we've just spent all this time talking about the importance of local representation and strengthening local communities.
Yeah.
Imagine what we could do with that. Imagine if you had representation that was restricted to Wharetoa or wherever you wanted to be. That this was the strong local voice. And we're going to work together to ensure this community is well represented, and that smaller iwi don't lose their voice because their representation is by someone who's probably lives, hundreds of kilometres from where they're based.
Yeah, I guess we need to wrap up a bit. You've got a campaign you've got to get back to, and
got to get back up. I've got a flight out this afternoon.
You've got a flight out this afternoon. Yep. So let's just reiterate how people who want to help New Zealand First win the Port Waikato by-election, how can they contact you? And the easiest way to do that is by emailing.
Yeah, casey@nzfirst.nz. Early voting starts the 13th of November. Last voting day is 25th of November. Remember, there is a by-election. So, I keep getting calls about, did you know your election signs are still up? Nope, they're up again, but I think that's one of the methods. But yeah, casey@nzfirst.nz, and let me know and vote for me.
Well, Casey, you're already in Parliament, but the opportunity to win the Port Waikato by-election means that New Zealand First get an extra candidate as well, another competent person that can assist, particularly around finance and commerce and those sorts of things.
Yeah,
and let's hope that you do win that David and Goliath battle, and you've got the courage to come and talk on Reality Check Radio. I can't say the same for Andrew Bailey, unfortunately.
No, I really appreciate your time, Cam.
No, most welcome, Casey. Thank you very much for coming on The Crunch. Casey is great, isn't she? So capable, and now an MP on a mission. As you heard, there's a real drive to bring some accountability to the COVID Royal Commission of Inquiry, and that's exactly why people backed New Zealand First. Don't forget to send comments on Casey's interview to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy right here on RCR.